2015. It wasn't the worst of years, but it wasn't the best of them either. Even without an extremely high-profile 24 to 26 episode series that has been prevalent for the last couple of years, this year was still able to give us some more subdued, yet polished gems for us to enjoy. So, while some people are still trying to sleep off their various turkey comas from Christmas and New Year's and whatever else you may celebrate at this particular time of year, I thought that it would be prudent to go and look over everything that I found to be personally remarkable. But I am going to be doing things a little differently, mainly because I don't feel like a traditional top 10 list would work for this video. Firstly, because as of late I have developed a minor dislike of the traditional top 10 format, and secondly, to actually do a top 10 list, properly I mean, would require me to have watched everything that came out this season, or at least most of it. I have not. That's either due to laziness or just plain lack of time, you know. It's so many shows, so little, you get the idea. So here's what we're going to do today. I have 10 shows that I'd like to briefly talk about, 5 shows which I have watched and personally recommend to basically everyone, and 5 blind suggestions that I have not watched. However, they've been on my to-watch list more or less all year, or at least from when they were released, and I'm willing to bet that at least one of them is really, really good. To make it on that list for blind suggestions, they either have to be recommended to me by a friend whose opinion I really trust, or they just have to be very, very heavily requested from people on the internet that want to see my thoughts. Either way, with any luck, these 10 shows will hopefully showcase the majority of what has been good from 2015. And if that's not enough, I'll probably throw some honorable mentions at the end to round everything out. And so, ladies, gentlemen, and others, my name is Okada, and welcome to Glass Reflection. Today, my top 10 anime recommendations for 2015. Recommendation number 1, Fate Stay Night, Unlimited Blade Works. This one is a good starting point, as it allows me to get one of my few rules for this sort of thing out of the way. To be considered for a best of 2015 anything, I think it is prudent to determine what to do with those shows that start in the previous year, this time being 2014. To me, anything for a 2015 list has to end in 2015. Yes, it may have started in October and aired over 12 episodes by now, but if it's not over by the end of December, save it for next year. As such, originally beginning in October of 2014, UBW is a series that ended this past June, and it is an adaptation years in the making. While I do have grievances with the show for some plot elements and character points, see my review incidentally. Ultimately, if nothing else, Unlimited Blade Works is an example of just pure spectacle and is a benchmark for what animation is capable of in this day and age with a television budget. While actually acquiring this visual masterpiece is rather expensive, especially for the import copies that cost on average just under $1 a minute, Crunchyroll has it on their site, so you should check it out if you can. Next up, blind suggestion number 1. The Heroic Legend of Arslan. This is a series I held off on mainly because my anime fan self of 5 years ago would be flipping shit over this series. I was in a big fantasy world kind of mood for a long time back then, and from everything that I've seen, this series looks to be like a culmination of everything I wanted from that genre. Unfortunately, while the version of myself 5 years ago would have probably watched this series on a weekly basis until either it ended or I determined it wasn't actually that good, my present self just put it on hold from the get-go, instead deciding to watch it when it completed. Which it did, about 3 months ago, and I just haven't gotten to it. Hopefully it'll live up to my hype, but if not, at least I'll get a lovely opening song by Yuki Kajira. Recommendation number 2, Death Parade. A type of show that I found I've missed watching is that short but sweet, character-driven kind of show. The ones that like to dig into how a variety of characters think and feel based on a very limited amount of exposure that we get to them. Kino's Journey, Mushishi, and a personal favorite of mine, Bartender, all like to show us characters in a format where each new episode tells an entirely different story. Sure, the set pieces remain constant and there is always an underlying plot that usually develops, but for the most part it's about the individual stories of the singular characters introduced in that episode. and Death Parade is the best one of these that I've seen in the last few years. Death Parade is a series about death and loss and denial and what a potential afterlife might look like. It shows us the various patrons of the Quindecim Bar. It explores how a wide variety of personalities deal with the reality of death. And it's less about how these characters died, but more about what they were able to accomplish in life and how that allowed them to become the person that they were. It's a fascinating look into what some people are willing to do when they think that their lives can still be saved, when they think that they have a chance at redemption, and ultimately, whether they pass the test of the Arbiter, Decim. If you happen to let this series pass you by earlier in the year, I highly suggest checking it out. Trust me, it is worth your time. Blind suggestion number 2, Your Lie in April. Now this is a series I'm torn with, mostly because I really want to watch it, but I know what pain and suffering awaits me. Not because the series is horrible and it will be painful to watch because of that, but rather because I think it's going to be really good, and it will be painful to watch because of that. Your Lie in April is a series that people keep suggesting I watch, that I talk about, that I review, mainly because of how much I love and have spoken at length about Clannad and Clannad Afterstory. They're sort of like, well, you love Clannad, right? Then you will love this, with love being in capital letters. But while it is true that I deeply love Clannad, I also feel like I don't know if I could handle that sort of emotional turmoil again. Like, rewatching Clannad is fine, because I know how it all turns out, but the uncertainty that a new series brings will be interesting, to say the least. I will watch it, though. Like, for the time being, I'm only holding off until a physical release comes out, but after that, I really won't have a good excuse anymore, and I'll just have to suck it up and face the music. Get it? Get it? Face the music, because it's a musical type show. Speaking of musical shows, recommendation number 3, Sound Euphonium. So, I talked about how good UBW looks, right? Well, let me put it this way. While I would never want to directly compare the artworks on these two series, UBW looks great in motion, while Euphonium makes mind-blowingly good still images. Not to say that the animation of Euphonium isn't good, because it totally is. It's just how the shots are framed, the colors fit that background blur, the right amount of flair, just... yes! Now, originally, I got hooked on this series because I used to be a band geek back in high school, and this series allowed me to relive the better parts of that experience while replacing the bad parts with a decently developed, implied lesbian relationship. The series has just the right amount of high school drama bullshit combined with a decent grasp of character relationships wrapped in a setting of a concert band. If you have an interest in music or just enjoy a nice slice of life experience, then Euphonium is a series that you should definitely check out. Blind suggestion number 3, my teen romantic comedy SNAFU 2. This series is here for one main reason. I watched season 1, and my god do I want to watch season 2. SNAFU had great characters, it had a nice variety of plot lines to it that got me engaged, but I will say that by the end of it, I wish I knew more about the show's main cast. Sure, you know them, you've seen them interact with people for 13 episodes by this point, but we don't really know them. Closest we get to an actual proper arc about any of them was the final one. The best one, incidentally. Before which I would have just calmly passed over the series as a comedic rom-com with not enough rom. But then we started to get glimpses into these characters, and I just want to know so much more. So if season 1 was of any interest to you, well, I would actually assume that if you've watched season 1 and enjoyed it, you've already watched season 2. Ahead of the curve you are then, or rather I'm just behind the curve. Go me. Blind suggestion number 4, Yuri, Kuma, Arashi. I know almost nothing about this series, with the exception of 2 things. Firstly, it aired this year, obviously. And secondly, I've lost count for the number of times people have asked me what I think about it, which is surprising because I've heard so little else about it. So, the reason why it's here is just how intriguing I'm finding it. Like, on the surface, it looks somewhat average, and what really stopped me from checking it out was the fact that it looks like a show called Maru Penguin Drum, a semi-magical girl series from a few years back that quite honestly I thought was, well, shit, with the exception of its transformation sequence anyway. Not ultimately surprising considering that both of these series share the same creator. However, the director, Ikihara Kunihiko, is also the director for the original Sailor Moon adaptation, as well as the director and original creator to Revolutionary Girl Utena, which might as well be his magnum opus for how flipping amazing it was. So part of me is hoping that Yuri, Kuma, Arashi ends up to be at least as worthy as both Sailor Moon and Utena, but my skepticism is high. So we'll see how that goes. Blind suggestion number 5, Assassination Classroom. I watched the series back when it started, and quite honestly, I initially wasn't too impressed by it. It's a series about a quasi-alien god thing that wants to teach a bunch of delinquent Japanese children before deciding to blow up the planet, and said children whose mission it is to stop their tentacle teacher from doing so. I'll admit, the concept itself is rather insane, which is probably the reasoning behind its popularity. The reason I put it on hold when I did is twofold. First, I honestly have no idea where the series could go, from a plot standpoint, beyond what I was already able to predict. All assassination attempts failed gloriously, and unless the series started to focus more on the backstory of its rather large cast, it was doomed for failure. There are only so many times that the spectacle of a good assassination attempt can last, considering that you know the outcome beforehand. And 2, when it was airing, I had little time to watch new shows, and I had to choose between this and Death Parade, so try and guess which one I went with. Now, the series is getting another season to its name, so perhaps I will finally get around to checking it out fully. And when I do, I pray that whatever alien being Kuro-sensei is, that my predictions about the show turn out to be false. Recommendation number 4, One Punch Man. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this one for multiple reasons. Firstly, considering the hype on the internet that exists for this series, if you followed any airing anime this past season, you were most likely also following One Punch Man. And secondly, I'm in the middle of writing my review for the series, and I would rather not swipe half the things I plan to say about it. And if you haven't watched it, and if you don't know anything about it, just go watch it, because to explain any of it might take away from it slightly. It'd be worth it to go and watch it knowing nothing if you just happen to be in that scenario right now. However, in general summary, One Punch Man is definitely a contender for Best Anime of the Year, and I'm quite sure that many a person has already awarded it as such. Now, while I personally do marvel at its magnificence, the honor of Best Anime of the Year, for me, does not go to it. Recommendation number 5, Shirobako. My title for Best Anime of the Year goes, without question or much deliberation, to Shirobako. Now, I bet a decent chunk of people will disagree with me on this, but any year that I've tried to decide the best anime of any given year, I always find it best to do it in a way that relies on my gut. This year, out of all the anime that came out and that I watched, Shirobako was one of those shows that, had it been a book, I would not have been able to put it down. At the end of every episode, I had this need to watch the next one. Like, I didn't have to watch the next episode, and just wanting to watch it doesn't fully describe the feeling. I needed to watch the next episode. As for why this is, the best way I can describe it is that it just hits the right notes for me. I've been passionate about anime for many a year now, and the actual creation of anime has always been something of a somewhat mystery. There were many cogs in the machine, as it were, that I either never knew how they functioned, or I never knew that they even existed in the first place. Sure, Shirobako probably sugarcoats a lot, and makes many aspects of the industry look much nicer and more fun than they probably are in reality. If I had any complaint to lay on the series, and it would be a minor complaint, it would be the small amount of time that gets spent on its voice actress plotline. However, that is made up easily if you go ahead and watch another show called Sore ga Seiyu, a series about a voice actress that also happened to come out this year. So if you have not watched Shirobako, if you've never heard of Shirobako, if you are on the fence with Shirobako, I beg you, please go and try it out, because I thought it was absolutely amazing, and with any luck, you will too. Or you'll just come back into the comments and tell me how wrong I am and how pissed off you are for me never talking about Danmachi in this video beyond this one casual side mention that I am currently making about it. Because Hestia is not Bestia GT Evo. Jokes. Now, the problem with limiting myself to only 5 is that inevitably there will always be some shows that get left out. But in case there are those of you out there who believe that my limitations are basically just saying that anything not on this list is totally not worth your time, something which is not necessarily true, here are some honorable mentions really quick. Ore Monogatari. Charlotte. Food Wars. Himouto Umaru-chan, and Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans. And that is it for 2015. 2016 actually looks quite promising so far, with a few shows that have already made it onto my watch list, even though I know literally nothing about them, which is kind of the norm, but we'll see how that goes. So with any luck, 2016 will be an amazing year, and if it isn't, well, hey, I'm just gonna have a ton of videos of me ranting for you guys then. Won't that be great? So until then, ladies, gentlemen, and others, stay frosty.